We have 5 panelists who have volunteered. The first one is Amy Mobley Turney. She's president of the League of Women Voters, and if you would come up as I announce your names. Amy's not only president, but she's been a member of the League of Women Voters in Houston for over 10 years. And if you ask her why she belongs to the League of Women Voters, she says it's pretty simple. It's a great place to stay involved in politics without getting caught up in partisan politics. So I encourage you all to support the League of Women Voters. The next panelist is Egberto Willies, and he's a KPFT program host for Politics Done Right on Monday evening, or some people call it Monday night. It's kind of late. The third panelist is Mike Honig. He's KPFT program host for ThinkWig Radio program Wednesday evening. The fourth one is Bill Crozer, president of Houston Peace and Justice Center. He's a longtime political activist in Houston and beyond, and he's also past board member for KPFT. And last, we have Phil Edwards from First Unitarian Universalist Church. Phil is a growth group leader in First UU. He's a member of the choir. And he's actually also been a volunteer music host at KPFT going way back to 1991. So we have a very distinguished panel tonight. The process that we're going to use is each panelist will be given 1 to 2 minutes to answer a question we submitted to the panelists. And basically, the question is, how much is our media controlled and censored today? And how does this affect Americans? So they'll be given 1 to 2 minutes to answer this question, and then we're going to take questions and comments from the audience. Do you have a volunteer panelist to start this? Amy raised her hand. Okay, thanks, Amy. And let's see, we need to get the mic.
Can y'all hear me? No. How's this? Is that better? So we've got to get very close to the microphone, guys. So I don't know if y'all know, we had a forum last week on low voter turnout in Harris County and potential solutions for that. And we're going to have a series of discussions on this. And so the first one was last Thursday, but I'm probably preaching to the choir here. You probably know that the turnout has not been as low in the state of Texas since 1942, and that was during World War II. And so if you look at the way the debates, are we going in and out? Okay. I will raise my voice then. If you look at the way the debates are today, it is just like what they were talking about in the movie. It's become entertainment. And the League of Women Voters still hosts debates at the state level and on down, but we're not part of the presidential debates anymore. And the reason for that is that there is a nonprofit that was formed, and they call it a nonprofit, but it is indeed a corporation, and it's funded by other corporations. And it's called the Commission on Presidential Debates. And if you put that into a search engine and do a little research on that, you will find that it has on its board actually past chairs of either the Democratic or the Republican parties. And the League of Women Voters, if you want to have some fun, look for the YouTube video of us with our press release with the national president saying why we refuse to participate in the presidential debates from now on, because of the demands that were made of the League in a closed meeting beforehand that we never got to participate in. Moving down to the state level, I don't know if you noticed, but there were very few state debates this year at the gubernatorial level. And this year, we just got the cold shoulder from the candidates on those debates. And it turned out that, and if you were paying attention, AARP sponsored those debates. Well, you think, oh, well, that's a nice organization. Actually, if you look at Medicare Part D and think about some of the people that have benefited from that, and also look at how many elected officials take contributions from AARP and how powerful a lobbying arm it is indeed much like a corporation. So we here in Houston have a partnership with Houston Media Source Television, and we've been very fortunate. And we do have shows where we have something called Conversations with the Candidates. And this year we invited all of the gubernatorial candidates to participate in those conversations, and only one responded. So we gave that one candidate, who happened to be a third-party candidate, an entire hour on television to have a conversation with the moderators about what their plans were for governance. And so people look at our debates as, when we were the only ones to host the mayoral debate last year, or year before last. And when we did that, it's because we approached the candidates and we were told by the mayor's people that she was only going to do one debate, and she had some things that she wanted to see. She wanted to see all of the candidates invited, and she wanted for any media outlet in town to be able to simulcast the debate at the same time. And so we were able to meet those restrictions or her request. But I believe I've gone over 10 minutes at this part, haven't I?
A few more seconds.
So what I want to let you know, though, if you again look at what happened with the Texas debates this year, and I believe that one of the reasons that turnout was so low is people only have information on television from what they're seeing in the commercials. The consultants really don't want you to see that much about the candidates. They prefer that they not really have to talk candidly at all, because the more you find out about them, the more you may not vote for their candidate. And so I'm going to turn it over to the rest of the people here.
Thanks, Amy.
Okay, as far as I'm concerned, we have lost the battle with the media, with the mainstream media, that is over. Does it have an impact on us as a society, as a people? Absolutely so. We just have to take a look at what occurred with the healthcare, Obamacare, which we know that they're coming to get your grandmother. We just have to look at what has occurred. Today I went to a rally with the unions. There was very little media out there of consequence to the rallies. If we want to see anything of consequence right now, the last place that we can go to is any one of those people, any one of those organizations we saw in the movie, NBC, MSNBC, or any one of them. Now, personally, and with some of the people I see here as well, I think it is time to simply give up on the mainstream media as a source of information. That really doesn't matter much, given that most of the people that you know, other than maybe many in here, consider them the sources of information anyway. I think what we have to start working on is a paradigm shift where, in working with other organizations that we've decided that we will ourselves become the media. And that's what many of us have already begun to do, become the media. Our little station, KPFT, independently funded by folks, that is what we do. We go out there and we find what is of interest, what is of social benefit to our people, and we put it out there. So I hope that is some of where we're going to go going forward, as far as letting folks understand that what you're seeing necessarily on the networks or wherever is just what they claim that it is. It's entertainment. I use it as a source of entertainment. You should use it as a source of entertainment. If you want news, be the media.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll be brief because I'd like to get some discussion going with you folks too. But I think it really is critical what Amy Goodman was talking about in the documentary about the role of the media and why that profession was set aside in the First Amendment of the Constitution. It's the only profession that's set aside that way for special protection by the government, and that the government, the founders of our country realized it was so critical to have an independent media that would be as a check on both big government and big corporations. They probably didn't envision how big and how powerful it could be now, and we saw a lot of examples here in this the documentary. But yeah, I hope you'll talk about or ask about what can we do about it. I mean, I have some opinions, and one of the things I think is tell people to turn off the TV, especially when it's so-called news. It's propaganda, and if you ever look at the trade journals for broadcast media, it's really clear what their function is. Their function is to deliver viewers to their advertisers. That is it. That is their sole function. And they'll do whatever it takes to get more people to watch their shows or to watch the advertisements. And unfortunately, even PBS has really deteriorated. You know, since the Reagan administration and a lot of the changes that they talked about in the documentary, PBS also is just really dependent on the big corporate underwriters, and they're so very reluctant to criticize those corporations. And even the news shows on PBS have been really watered down. So I could go on more, but I encourage you to really support KPFT and independent media. It's so critical. It's more important right now than it ever has been. And I hope we will get a chance to talk a little bit more about some of the effects, but it's really sad. And I'll just say, there's been one encouragement though this last week, is the FCC, as you probably know, did endorse network neutrality, but some of the big corporations, the big media conglomerates, are already talking about fighting that, either in court or with more big campaign contributions for people running for office in a couple of years. So we're going to have to watch out for that.
Thanks, Bill.
Okay. Well, I was in the position, I always worry about not having enough to say to fill my time, and then now I'm going forth and I figure everyone's going to say what I'm going to say, but I think I've gotten lucky. I think I'm going to start with this. You hear a lot of people talking about government needing to be more efficient. It's always about government efficiency. Government is so terribly inefficient. And my understanding from history is that the Constitution wasn't designed with an efficient government in mind. It was designed with a safe, messy government in mind. And I think the same can be said for media, for information dissemination. It's not intended to be efficient so that many large or a few large corporations can own many outlets so that they can have synergies. It's intended to be messy and informative and allow well-educated people who are taught to think critically to make decisions based on a variety of information and then use essentially the legal premise of a preponderance of the information. Make their own choices based on their knowledge, based on their experience, and based on the assortment of things that they hear. All information that we get, no matter where you get it from, whether it's from KPFT or ABC News or this movie, it's all point of view. Everything is point of view. Even the music that is used, even the tone of the voice of the narrator, all of that is meant to inflect your emotions and your feelings. And just as an aside, you'll notice that when you listen to many political commercials, I'm not a great music guy in terms of my knowledge of terminology, but if you listen to a lot of political commercials, the opponent is always in a minor chord, and the candidate is always in a major chord. Pay attention. Music is really, really subtle, and most people don't pay attention to it, but it's a critical part of any message. I think that government, I'm going to go over. Government-funded systems, I think, are a partial solution, but they're still not perfect, because then instead of being subject to media influence, you're subject to government influence. It's part of a solution. I think that Houston Public Media and similar stations are not a substitute for public service editorials on main stations like we used to have, where a citizen or a representative of a group could come on and get a minute or two at 2 in the morning, but when somebody is watching, and have their say. Houston Public Media, most people can't even find it. Some people just program it out of their DVRs or whatever. I I think that what we need to do, it's of course, past history is terribly important. Past is prologue. We can talk about the Reagan administration. We can talk about all the different rules and regulations that have been waived, created, broken. All of that matters. But the thing that mainly matters is the need for a new American revolution without bullets and without blood, but with ballots, and the challenge all of us face, the challenge I face and Egberto faces, anybody on the radio who has public spirit, the problem we face is encouraging people to get out and vote. And you know, I used to think, I'm just going to wrap this up really soon, I used to feel like many people often do, if you don't know the policies, if you don't know the issues, if you don't know the candidates, you really shouldn't vote. You shouldn't vote out of ignorance. I've come to understand later in life that that isn't necessarily true, that if the people who aren't sure don't vote, then the people who are awfully, awfully sure and represent very focused, specific interests, yes, I'm aware, very focused, specific interests, they get to dominate the ballot. The light rail was approved by a majority of 10% of the voters. That's what we're always faced with, multi-billion-dollar, multi-decadal situation. All right, your turn.
All right, thank you. Yes, well, I think the movie, of course, did a very good job of answering this question preliminarily, and then left it with that open question about net neutrality and the internet, which is something I've been very interested in as a consumer and as someone who has been interested and involved in media at different times in my life. And I like to take a historical perspective. This, the problem of control of the media, I'm sure it goes back to the 19th century in newspapers, and then I'm very interested in the history of radio, which they touched on in a couple of the segments of the movie, how it first started out as just a popular expression, use and playing with the new technology like the early days of the internet. It seems to me it's the same thing. And then it's developed and the technology has advanced, and then commercial interests suddenly get interested in it, and the whole thing changes. And that keeps going. It happened with radio. It happened, they talk about it in the Communications Act of 1933, and it goes back to 1926 when Herbert Hoover was the first Department of Commerce secretary. And so I think it's a constant struggle. And what Egberto said is that all of us have to be aware of where we're getting our news, what the source is, how it's filtered, who's controlling it. And I think that's always the first step and the most important level, that at the people level, we have to know where the news is coming from and who is controlling it. And I think this is just a part of what's been going on, as I say. I'm sure if I knew more about the 19th century, you could go back and study the newspapers and the control of information through newspapers. And now we're confronted with the internet and who's going to control that, and how can people keep a voice in media. And again, I think what has been said here already is just at the first level, we have to be aware of where the news is coming from and make sure we inform ourselves from the right sources.
Okay, you've heard from all the panelists, and so now it is your turn to ask questions for the panel, or if you want to ask a question for specific panelists based upon what you've heard them say or what you know about them, that's fine too. We do have a floating mic someplace. We have a mic here too, yeah. I think it's probably better for you to come up here with your question so everybody can hear what the question is. So, first question.
Is this mic over here live?
It's wireless, it works.
Go ahead and use this one, we'll test the other one.
Hi, my name is Brandon. So I just had a question. So I just had a general question from anyone. I saw the movie and it really struck a chord in me. I guess my question is, what are some worthy news sources? You know, like I don't have cable. I don't watch cable. I hate cable TV. You know, you turn on the TV and it's, you watch this crap that they put on there. I really don't know who to trust. I have certain apps on my phone. For example, this app called Flipboard is an aggregator. And I try to get as much news as possible, but what are some very, I guess, credible news sources that I could go to?
Can I start? I think going to news aggregators, I think, is the first step. A good news aggregator gets information from all over the world. I've actually found through aggregators, I now follow the Twitter account from like the Irish Times, which I find is actually a pretty interesting publication. I follow the BBC. I try to look at Al Jazeera. I try to be diverse. LA Times, smaller newspapers, Christian Science Monitor. If you get enough diversity in your information, I think you'll be okay, and I think an aggregator, a good aggregator, is an important part of that.
I also think it's important, first of all, to realize that most journalists, they don't want to be bad, or they don't want to really do wrong. They just can't always do right. So I find that I read the New York Times a lot. I watch MSNBC, CBS, Fox News. Believe it or not, you can even get truth out of Fox News. So it may sound ironic, but you can actually get some truth out of Fox News. What you have to be is a good aggregator, like Mike talks about aggregating the news. That is important, but I tell you, I think of most importance is to actually find bloggers who interpret or reinterpret news that they've read. In other words, as a blogger myself, I would read the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Consortium News, which is an independent news from a person who discovered what occurred with Iran-Contra, etc., and put the subjects together. In other words, if you take the aggregation of many different sources, it's amazing how much truth come out of that, as opposed to listening to just one person's perspective.
Well, I'll just say, just briefly, I mean, there are a lot of online sources. I'd stay away from the TV again. But, and really, listen to KPFT. We have a lot of great programs on KPFT right here locally that Egberto and Mike and other people, host. And you get a variety of different viewpoints, as well as some of the syndicated shows that are on that station. But there's also, online things like the Real News, the Huffington Post, the Texas Observer. They have things right here in Texas, and they're a print publication too, of course. But I think you shouldn't rely on any one source of information.
Well, I would just say it seems what we're saying is avoid anything that is controlled by commercial interests, but that leaves your non-commercial part of the radio dial, which KPFT is a shining example, I think. And we've talked about the internet. The internet, you can still pick and choose. There's a wide variety, and I hope it stays that way forever. And I think, and also with the internet, you can reading for me is much better because you can be much more selective and skip over things, and like yes, TV in the background with the sound off seems to work for me really well.
I'm just going to insert one comment here because I talk too much anyway. I think that we need to make a point of not just trusting the FCC, but looking to the Justice Department. They broke up AT&T after decades of legal effort. And I think we need to look at the media not as a monopoly necessarily, but certainly as an oligopoly, where a small number of companies are controlling 90% of what we hear. 6 companies control over half the radio stations in Houston. And I think we need to be looking now for a Justice Department involvement in order to try to get these companies to start divesting themselves of a lot of this media and breaking it back up.
Okay, how about other questions?
If it were 1 or 2 or even 3 organizations, I could understand how they could all get together and have the same story or suppress things. When you get to 4 or 5 or 6 in one area, how can it be that controlled? So how do 6 organizations get together and have the same message? That just seems, in my personal life, you get 10 people in a room, you have 20 opinions. How do you get 6 organizations to have the same message?
Well, first, a lot of the corporations have interlocking boards. They have some of the same people on some of the same boards of them. But also, you've got their goal, the commercial broadcasters, their goal, again, is to make money. They talked about it in the documentary. And so they have their common interest there. And entertainment, they want to get people glued to the screen. And, they don't want to make people uncomfortable. Some of the stuff that people really need to know about kind of makes you feel a little uncomfortable. It's about corruption. It's about things that need to be changed, about where our system's not working. Now, unless it has some sort of a voyeuristic kind of quality, they like that kind of stuff, or some tragedy that affects 1 or 2 people in the whole world. They love that kind of stuff, any human interest stories. But it doesn't serve their interests to come up with things that people have to think about a little bit, and that makes them question the role of the media, especially.
No, but I want to follow up on what the last speaker was saying, because I don't feel like we're really hitting it here. You read something, you read a story that interests you on the internet, whatever news outlet, and you try to look at another story, and it's exactly the same story. They're using the same words. I don't know whether it's Associated Press or what, but they're not hiring enough reporters. They're all just copying each other's work. So you have trouble even finding a fresh point of view because you're just finding the same point of view.
You just hit it on the money, and they mentioned that in the movie as well. And that is, there's no budget for. Look at what's happening at
Right.
New York Times right now, or
There's
all
not
the,
enough
There's not
reporters.
enough reporters going
Right.
around there. And what happens is, if you have
They're selling their work to
right,
everybody else.
exactly.
Yeah.
If you have a source and your source is deemed credible, then you pick it up and run with it. But how many
Yeah,
people
and then
know?
they don't spell things right, and they maybe take out a sentence or two, but it's basically the same thing.
Right. I mean, I don't disagree with that, but I mean, that's why you have other sources of information too. And they are out there. The problem is that many people don't go to it. I mean, many people don't go to all the different sources. How many people here read, well, here they do, but how many people look at Al Jazeera or many of the other sources that you would actually really find independent news there?
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd say ditto here. I actually worked some temporary positions where I'd go into companies in the 90s when the radio stations were being flattened. And when I say being flattened, if you look back at the management trends of the early 90s where corporations were flattening management, and companies were coming in now that they could own the top 6 radio stations in town, so they didn't need as many staff members. If they could put all the radio stations in one location, then they didn't need as many salespeople. Those salespeople could go around and sell to all 6 people. They only needed 1 programming person to worry about, and this goes as far as Houston Public Media. One of the things one of the obstacles that we came up against when we were trying to plan the hosting of the debates was finding out that they had changed their management structure, and many of the programming decisions don't even come out of Houston. So there wasn't a person in Houston that I could depend upon to call on to get a definite answer. And it has become, even for them, almost an entertainment piece, in that they demanded that we get the top 2 candidates for the debates, or they weren't going to host them at all in the statewide races. And that's not the way that we do things. And again, these decisions are not even, when you look at what you think would be a local decision, those decisions may be coming from somewhere else within the country.
Could you elaborate on what you just said about Houston Public Media being controlled outside Houston? Who is it controlled in your experience?
I don't know what I was told is programming decisions. Programming decisions.
Programming decisions are
They were not made here in Houston. So,
And who were you told this by?
a reporter at Houston Public Media.
Radio or television?
Television. So we were looking at televised debates.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't think it's fair to necessarily castigate like AP and UPI and Reuters. I mean, they serve legitimate purposes. The original reason for things like the Associated Press and United Press International was that small newspapers and radio stations and television stations could participate in world news accumulation. So, yes, you're going to get a certain amount of the same story propagated through many, many different media outlets, and that's okay. The problem is, again, you don't have the diversity because you don't have the reporters going out there and doing the digging. Most people, I think, are basically decent. Corporations are basically sociopaths. I mean, that's just the reality. So that's where, again, diversity comes in, breaking up media, getting more voices, getting less constraint, based on essentially talking about why these sources seem to sound the same, these half-dozen sources. They have the same incentives, and the same kinds of people tend to rise to positions of power. And again, diversity helps to fix that somewhat.
Well, to get back to the original question, the movie addressed it and talked about if a story doesn't make it to the media echo chamber, then it doesn't get across to the public. I thought that was interesting because it's an informal. It's an informal arrangement. It's sort of understood and it's somewhat fluid, but they were saying 5 or 6 corporations, mainly the newspapers up till now, determine what is an important story and what's marginal, and they can define what's marginal and marginalize it. And I think Bill was talking about it. It has to do with commercial interests underneath it all, because if it gets to the media echo chamber, if someone wants to defy it, I think they would be afraid because they will lose, listenerships. They don't want to be seen as challenging the corporate interests, the money part that flows with the media echo chamber. So that's what I thought that came to mind when that question was first asked.
I wanted to add one other thing, though. When we earlier spoke about a paradigm shift, and I think this is rather important, one of my biggest fears was that net neutrality wasn't going to be, we weren't going to get net neutrality because at that point, it's all gone. And what I mean by that is as follows. Right now, many of the folks have been asking questions like, where do I get my sources from, or where do I get the information from, et cetera? And what information is it that we're really looking for? Things that are happening around us, things that are happening around our country, and things that are happening internationally. And the reality is those sources of information are right here, or right there, or right wherever. I mean, one of the reasons I talk about wanting to have net neutrality and keeping the internet open is that anybody here who works at a company and hears a rumor or hears something can actually placing that inside the internet realm is going to awaken somebody. As a blogger, when I see things in people's feeds, I look at it, I don't take it at face value, but I research it and then make something out of it. We don't need an official journalist to do that because now everybody plays, we have the wherewithal now where everybody plays a part in this entire space. So I think if we have that paradigm shift and start thinking that we are responsible for our own knowledge, we are responsible for our own experiences, and we all crowdsource information so that we can all make use of it, I think at that point we don't make AP or UPI or UPI still exists? UPI still exists. Yeah, we don't make any one of these guys irrelevant, but we make, a lot of times we make them come into compliance because guess what? You are the media. It's all part of the mix. Yeah.
We have another question or two from the audience.
Thank you. I just have a question about what you think should be done to galvanize the youth in relation to becoming more aware about this because I don't know, idealistically, people would go and research all of this information. I do that because I want to find a truth myself and I don't trust what I see online or on mass media. However, most people will not go and have the attention span to go and see, oh, I see this, I'm going to take it at face value, I'm going to go and research this, I'm going to compare it to other sources. Most people will not do that. They just want to have it the easy way. They want to be able to just read it right away and like come up with their own opinion. It's been a trend that I've noticed among my peers is that there's a serious lack of, attention span. It's just gone out the window. Like, if you're holding a conversation with someone, they'll be checking their Instagram, Facebook, whatever, like at least 3 times. And like, they still try and hold a conversation, and they are able to, but they just aren't able to pay as much attention to it as they should. Oh, and one other thing is I get about asking about public news sources online. Who was it? I don't remember. He was asking about it. I get most of my international news from Vice News online, and I've noticed that they do a pretty good job, pretty decent job of kind of gathering up all of the international news.
I'm going to say this as one of the, well, actually, I guess most of us are old on this panel. I'm not going to mention any names, but most of us. Well, we can compete. My stepdaughter is 23, and I deal with a number of people who are, let's say, between 15 and 30. And what I notice is, in terms of your question, I don't even know how to call these people, okay? They don't answer their phones. They don't pick up their voicemail. They no longer even check their email. If you're lucky, they'll see your text embedded among all the other texts that they're getting. So in terms of answering his question, I, as a representative old person, I'm pretty much at a loss, if I'm to be honest. I think it behooves him and people like him who understand how you can get the attention of people his age to figure out what it will take. It really is going to take people your age to figure it out, because people our age just can't get it.
And then share it with the rest of the world.
And then share it with the rest of us.
You know, I work with Mike, and I was waiting to see how Mike was going to answer that question. I really, really, really was. But that's exactly what I was going to say. We need you more than you need us, because you need to teach us how to reach your folks. Now, I can tell you on a personal basis, I play around with trying to use videos or short skits on Facebook to try to attract attention, and I do metrics to figure out what kind of stuff works with the youth. But old folk need the young folk to actually engage and be our teachers in this realm and tell us, hey, you guys have the platform, use it the way we need you to use it.
Yes, I agree. We absolutely need your secrets. I will say our website, if you go to it right now, it's very out of date. And the reason is that I am president before I had planned to be president, and there are some other priorities I need to take care of right now. My official term would begin in May. So at our recent event, I was just sweating bullets because we had some very important speakers come. We had Richard Murray from University of Houston, and we had Mark Jones from the Baker Institute for Public Policy, and we had Hector de Leon from the county clerk's office, and we had a very well-known media consultant, and I thought, oh my gosh, they're never going to work with us again because of our inability to get the word out on this event. But we have this group of people in the League of Women Voters called the Rising Stars, and they just blow my mind. And they did whatever magic that they do on social media, and I will say that at least with the leagues in all of the United States, the League of Women Voters of Houston is the best with social media, but we can't figure out what the young people are using now. We know that the young people aren't using Facebook anymore, right? Am I right? But somehow we were able to get the event to be standing room only thanks to people from your generation. And again, we did a very poor job of advertising it in the way that I know how to do it, but thanks to people like you, we did get them out there. So you have a big responsibility.
Just wait to get done with this.
I just want to add one thing. Yes, I agree with what I said, with what she said. All of that is true. But that isn't to say that old folks like us don't have a place in your mission. Okay? Living memory is much more valuable than written history. Experience with how to find what you're looking for is something that, while you guys may be really good at using the net, sometimes we know terminologies that maybe you wouldn't think to look for, little historical bits of seed that you wouldn't know to even search by. So you guys need to figure out the way to get the message out, but don't forget to come to the older folks to figure out what information you need the message to contain.
And for the older people here, y'all need to learn and keep up with whatever social media is there. Don't you dare say, I'm not going to use Facebook, and I'm not going to use Twitter, and I'm not going to use Instagram. You need to learn it. If you want people to know what you're thinking, if you want people to know your message, then you need to learn the latest technology.
I'm hoping that this is about letting people in the conversation here. But anyway, all I wanted to say was that in terms of getting the message out, I'm wondering, and maybe I'm just missing it, but where's the political music that we used to have that was so inspiring and really brought us together in the 60s? Where's the songs about political issues that are going to bring us together? Maybe they're out there, but I'm just not hearing them.
It's all about weed and sex. That's it. That's all music is.
Or at least that's what the media conglomerates are airing.
I guess I have a related question for the panel, and that is, we've talked about the younger people, but we've been in Houston about 20 years, and we're appalled at the local media, the television stations especially. They're giving, I think, what a large number of people want, and that is, as mentioned earlier, crime and sensationalism and all that on a 10 o'clock news. What can be done about that to educate not only the younger people, but the older people who really are a challenge probably for you to reach also?
Well, let me say first, I'll just plug one little event about music. I think I agree. I remember back from during the Vietnam War days, and there was a lot of music played in the mainstream media too that was really political, and I really liked that. But there's an event that my organization, Houston Peace and Justice Center, is sponsoring a week from tonight. Roy Zimmerman, he's a really funny, talented songwriter, satirist, musician, and it's sort of a social event too. There's some flyers out there, and you can look at our website. But there are people like that out there. You can also see him on YouTube. His name is Roy Zimmerman, and there are people who do really not good political music, but you're not going to hear them on the commercial stations, though. You're going to hear them on KPFT and online.
David Rovics, too.
Yes, David Rovics, right, exactly.
I think the question you raise is one of those things that's like Plato's Republic. Every generation asks the same question. It's always a matter of sex sells. If it bleeds, it leads. Local news has always been that way. We have typically relied on the national news and their integrity to bring us the important stories. And local news is supposed to be local news. It's supposed to be who robbed the store and where there was a traffic accident. The problem is that hierarchy of information has broken down, so you can no longer rely on large organizations with tremendous resources that have integrity to take up their part of that burden. I think that would be my opinion as to how to get older people to learn the news. I don't know. My mom is going to be 93, and I bought her a laptop 5 years ago, and I still can't get her to use it for anything but sticky notes. Literally sticky notes.
I'll just say, I read the Houston Chronicle every day, and I think the newspaper is much better about local news than what you see on TV, for sure.
I think the Chronicle sucks, but that's another story.
Well, there's some things lacking in the Chronicle too, but it has a lot more than what you see on the TV, though.
This is a good one. Why don't you, a couple more comments about the Chronicle.
Well, I mean, my opinion has come to be that ever since the Houston Post died, I think that the Houston Chronicle took advantage of its monopoly in this. I mean, essentially it's a monopoly, And they've become nothing more than a little neighborhood newspaper sold throughout the entire city. Their reporting tends to reflect the more conservative political perspectives. They tend to use, like UPI and Associated Press and those resources as a crutch. They really have become a lousy newspaper. There is not a good local newspaper with any considerable geographical coverage in this city, in my opinion.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say it was incredibly painful to watch, but I want to give a round of applause to the person representing the documentary company. I was in shock when it was over and it didn't happen, but I want to do it now.
Thank you.
Hey y'all, I just want to say thank you for all the work that the League of Women Voters and KPFT and all your organizations do. But working with the Green Party, sometimes I feel like we are that which cannot be mentioned. That sometimes media studiously might ignore our existence, and so that can make it hard to get message out that we see the reason that people aren't turning out to vote as they have nothing to vote for, and this need for change, for switching over to renewable energy, putting people to work, and getting out of these wars for oil. So what can we do to break through that acknowledgement barrier? You know, I think people are coming to resonance and everybody comes at it from a different angle. But it's really, really hard to break through when you can't be mentioned. So what can we do to combat that?
You can get it first, but I really...
First of all, this is one Democrat that loves the Green Party, okay? Really, because I consider the Green Party my heart, because I'm a very left-wing Democrat. That said, I think there's a town in California right now that just elected a green mayor. I don't remember what town it is, what city it is in California. Yeah, I'll get it to you. But the good thing about it is what they did is they started to form alliances. I think right now many folks in the Green Party in Houston tend to be antagonistic towards several positions as opposed to trying to be more, get into the fold. I think if that occurs and that sort of an alliance occurs, we could do quite a bit more. Now, as far as not being mentioned, anytime you have some green folks that want to come on politics done right and on an issue, we're always open to it.
I think that's a great question. Now, I tend to sort of bill myself as the most conservative liberal at KPFT. I think that that's actually a fair assessment. I'm a liberal, but I'm not where he is. But I think in terms of responding to your question, I think that the best thing you can do is not bother trying to run a president or a governor or a senator. Focus on the mayor. Focus on the city council. You guys have a lot of diplomatic opinions that I don't necessarily agree with, but a lot of what you want, I might very well agree with for a local level. And that's where you need to build your support. Why do you want to be on a national ballot and get 1% and prove to everybody you don't matter? Why don't you get on a city ballot and run for a city seat and get 15 or 20% and show people you've got something to say? That would be my advice.
I don't know the answer, but I think that it's a good question, and it relates very much to what the documentary is about too, because it's about getting mainstream ideas out in front of the public, and that's something that the mainstream media is failing about in all kinds of ways, and that's a good example.
To my liberal conservative. Anyway, no, the one thing I personally don't like to hear is to tell somebody that you shouldn't run. But the thing about it is, in taking it aside, I think, in as much as you may say that, I think you have to think about what the consequences are of what you do. But nobody, I think, should tell you not to.
Yes.
I'm also going to say I'm against the thought of you not running because you need to get 5% of the vote overall in Texas to be able to get on the ballot without any problems. And I think it's a crime what it takes for third parties to get on the ballot in Texas. But I do want to, I'm supportive of y'all getting on the ballot, but I do have some criticism for the Greens. Y'all are damn hard to get in touch with. I know Art Story and I know Don Cook, and so if I'm having trouble getting in touch with a candidate that might live here in Houston, I can call them and they can give me the information. But that third-party candidate that we gave an hour to on television last year was not the Green Party candidate.
I know. I can actually answer, but I don't know that you want me to.
Yeah, but y'all need to make yourself easier to get in touch with. Some of you on the applications for when we have to figure out how to get in touch with you. Your website's not current. When we go to the campaign finance reports to at least get a telephone number, you haven't put a telephone number on there, so don't be so secretive. Let us. Sure.
Amy makes a very fine criticism, and I know specifically what she's referencing. But to be more constructive, I'll just say I'm currently serving as the co-chair of the Green Party of Texas, and I just took that role at the end of last year. We've just come online with a new website. We're doing a lot to streamline the organizing and to bring up the level. And I understand it is a fair criticism to say that, if we can't get hold of you, what are we supposed to do? But I will say, the Green Party is a grassroots, consensus-driven party, and it's entirely volunteer. So while we haven't performed as we would like to in the past, we are definitely moving forward.
We're all volunteer as well. Yes, I understand.
Can I say something very quickly about third parties in general? I think in a non-parliamentary system like we have, unless you have a requirement for a 50% vote, I think third parties create a serious intrinsic problem in distorting the will of the voters. So I favor the notion of third parties contributing new ideas and different ways of thinking, but in terms of splitting the vote in a non-parliamentary system where you don't build coalitions, it's just winner take all, I think that's a problem we need to fix in order to enable third parties to make a significant contribution in terms of the ideas out in the world.
At this stage, I want to thank the panelists. I think we've pretty much run out of time, and I want to thank the panelists for real and outstanding panel discussion. As far as exceeded my expectations, let's give them a hand. And then, second of all, Doc Factory did an incredible job on the documentary, and let's give Doc Factory a hand. There's a third group that should be given a hand too, because they somehow took over our panel, and it's called, what is it, KPFT? Let's give them a hand.
And the League of Women Voters, too.
Yeah, especially the voters. On behalf of the First Unitarian Universalist Church and Doc Factory and KPFT, I want to thank all of you for coming out tonight. Hope you got something out of this program. If you didn't sign in when you came in, you can sign out when you go out. We'd like you to do that. And again, thank you all for coming. If you have a couple comments for the panel, if you want to talk to them individually, they'll probably be here for a couple more minutes. Thank you again.
I do. I'd like to say thank you to the social justice team at First Unit for putting this whole thing on.
Thank you, Phil. And as long as we're giving thank yous, I want to thank the social justice team and First Unitarian Universalist Church. This is really the biggest forum we've done in recent years, and we appreciate everybody coming out and helping us get a start on this. We hope this is just the beginning of future open forums where we bring in diverse ideas on important issues in the community so that we all can be better educated and make better decisions as voters. So thank you again for coming.
I want to thank all of you for coming and being here too.
And being so quiet while we talk so much.